Welcome to the More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we call it, real debate without the hate. Hi there, I'm DJ McGuire from Suffolk, Virginia. I'm your neoconservative libertarian, with my fireball as always.
I'm Greg Matusak from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'll be your liberal Democrat tonight with my non-alcoholic drink. Thinking of you, Hillary.
This is Emily Brewer, your moderate Republican from Virginia, and I just need to say that I heart Sally.
This is Cliff Dunn, a Republican from Virginia, and I've just got a nice cup of tea.
And I'm Kevin Kelton, a moderate Democrat in Los Angeles County, and I am dedicating my fireball on the rocks tonight to Jessica.
Woohoo!
A More Perfect Union can be found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and on Facebook at facebook.com/More Perfect Union Podcast. So please share our link on your newsfeed so your friends can find us. A fascinating week in the news, including some new information that came to us today on 9/11 about the health of one of our candidates. Gang, who wants to take this one and run with it?
I will try my best. So I understand this morning Hillary was in New York for the 9/11 memorial. She was there approximately 90 minutes and decided to depart. And she went to go take a bit of a respite at Chelsea's apartment and then emerged sometime later.
And emerged looking fine and dandy, a lot of smiles, glad-handed with a kid, took some photos with the kid in the shot, and obviously was trying to put out the message that whatever happened earlier in the day, she's now back to normal and healthy as can be. That's the message her campaign wanted to put out there.
They also revealed, however, that she was diagnosed with pneumonia on Friday, as sort of an explanation for why she was not doing too well at the 9/11 ceremony. And so we now actually have a situation where a campaign has responded to the crazed conspiracy theory of their Republican opponent by actually giving evidence to corroborate said theory by hiding an illness for 2 days.
True.
I am thunderstruck by the utter stupidity behind this. Okay?
Yep. And by the way, adding more fire to what I would have called a myth up until now, but now I can't call it that anymore, that she lies, because she said it was just an allergy attack that she was having when she had that 1.5 minute or 2 minute coughing fit the other day, and then it comes out that she was diagnosed with pneumonia. So she fed into two bad storylines, narratives of the Trump campaign this week.
And to give
Well, she is very talented at keeping to storylines. It's just always fun when it's our storylines and not hers.
You know what I think the problem is here is that so the media, she understands that the media will just hound and hound and hound at her if her health is just the least bit off, because I do think the media does set an unreal standard on women's health over men's, and we will find that more and more as we have female candidates. But I will say this, there is nothing wrong with hitting this head on, and I think for her it would have been a better thing to say, I have pneumonia. I have been run down. I am tired. I am taking the next 3 days to spend with my family, reflect on the meaning of September 11th, and come forward the next couple of days and hit the campaign trail again.
Agreed. Because what has happened now is instead what she has done is she's given voters who clearly have trust issues with her more reason to have trust issues. I mean, the Washington Post ABC poll, which came out this morning, had the president's approval rating at 58%. 58%. If the president's approval rating is anywhere north of 55%, the incumbent party should be cleaning up, wiping the floor with their opponents. Instead, Mrs. Clinton can't get to 50% and is only 5 to 8 points ahead of Donald Trump. It's because voters, as much as I do not like to admit this, voters are very eager to elect a Democrat as president this year, but not her, because they don't trust her.
Okay, well, let me just correct a couple of things there.
Let me add one thing. What was the number? How far ahead was Clinton on that same ABC News Washington Post poll?
Let me tell you, because that's what I was just going to jump on my good friend DJ.
Jump on that soapbox.
She was in the two-person head-to-head. She was 51 to 41, so she was above 50%. She was on the four-person poll. She was at 46% to Trump's 41%. Gary Johnson at 9%. and Jill Stein of the Green Party at 2%.
But the fact of the matter is, Kevin, there is not a state in the union where it will be only a 2-person race. Gary Johnson is on the ballot everywhere.
You're right, but when you say, she's not at 50%, it's the same argument that Donald Trump made all during the primaries when he said, I had 17 opponents. Of course I wasn't going to get 50% of the vote. A 2-person race, you can make that 50% argument. But she is above 50% on the ABC poll, and it may be an outlier. That 58% of Obama's, I'm a big Obama fan, but it may be an outlier. I don't think he's at 58% approval.
There is general agreement among the polls that he is above 50%.
Yes.
Even if he's not as high as 58, he's at least at 50 or higher. The point is, this should be a very good year for the Democratic nominee. But because it is her and because of the trust issues that the electorate has with her, this is a problem. What she should do, in my opinion, is just take the whole week off and say, I'm going to recover for the whole week. Tim Kaine is going to handle the campaign. You remember Tim Kaine. He's a U.S. Senator. He's a former governor. He's a former mayor. This is the kind of leadership you can expect if I have to take a week off in the White House.
That would be a PR disaster.
No,
are you kidding?
Because voters... I'm sorry.
Yeah. I still want to get back. I still want to get back to the question.
The farther away Hillary Clinton is from a camera or a microphone, the better she does.
No.
Period.
Okay.
I still want to get the Democrats' perspective. What do you guys think she should have done?
She should have taken the weekend off, put it on the table. I've got, what amounts to I've got a cold. I'm taking 2 days off, and hope that she'd be back in shape on Monday.
Look,
exactly.
I agree with you all that this was a misstep. But for Hillary Clinton to miss 9/11 and to say, look, I don't feel well, I am sick, I am weak, and miss 9/11. No, that's what it would have been perceived as.
No, she should have taken care of herself days before now, so she could have been there. You see what I'm saying?
She was diagnosed on Friday.
She was diagnosed on Friday.
And today is Sunday. Right? Today's Sunday.
Just because you're diagnosed, you know something's going on.
Right. So to say that a day and a half, 2 days later, if she would have missed 9/11, the storm, excuse my parler français, would have been just incredible. No, this is a woman who, when she took that 11 hours of congressional beating like a champ, everyone would cheer and was like, she can do this. She's tough enough. And that's what we're really looking for is she tough enough? And that's what they're always asking for. And can she stand up? Is she just as tough? So no, it was a misstep. But
I'll call it the Rick Perry question, though, where he goes on the debate, shows up, he's drugged to heck and back, as I understand it, and he can't remember the 3 departments he wants to abolish. And now that's all anybody remembers Rick Perry for. You don't want to go out there in a situation like this and make a complete idiot of yourself.
Yeah, it ruined his career.
It's easy to second guess. She's running for the presidency. It's not a time where you take sick days. In retrospect, today obviously was a public relations disaster for the Clinton campaign. The Trump campaign is going to make fodder of it for weeks and weeks to come. But
I fully expect the Trump campaign to come out and object and question the health assessment she got earlier in the campaign, because if she's lying now, did she lie then?
Oh, of course.
I don't think it would it have been politically damaging if Hillary had missed 9/11 because she was ill? Possibly, but it would have been less damaging than what actually happened to her today. Is my point. And with all due respect, presidents and presidential candidates, they can take sick days. I mean, Ronald Reagan handed over presidential powers to George Bush in 1985 for 2 or 3 days when he was undergoing his operation.
I want to ask this question of the conservatives on the panel. Your honest assessment, Cliff, DJ, Emily, is Hillary Clinton's health good enough to be president of the United States?
Yes.
Probably.
I'll say probably, and I will say this, is that there's been a long history on any of the parties going back, to the beginning of time, that several presidential candidates and presidents have hidden their health purposefully, and they still had fine administrations or were able to conduct the business of the office accordingly. So I would say yes.
Okay, so should the Trump campaign be using this narrative, and that's a polite word that I'm using, should they be using this narrative as a political wedge against her?
Of course, because it just brings voters to Gary Johnson, so I'm perfectly happy with it.
So what you're saying
that's not what you mean, is it?
Wait, so what you're saying is all's fair in politics, it ain't beanbag, and anything is okay, even if it's a low blow.
Somebody please tell me that Kevin heard my pro-Johnson sarcasm in that.
I heard it.
Thank you.
I heard
Somebody heard it.
Okay.
No, the simple fact of the matter is it does not take all that much, in my opinion. To be president of the United States really is and should be all about sitting behind a desk, hiring the people to run the various departments the way they should, making speeches when necessary, and in the 21st century you can do that from a desk, you can do it from a sick bed, you can do it from an easy chair. Okay. There are a lot of things that we assume presidents need to do that they don't really need to do.
Okay, so I would say that we've beaten the subject of health to death, but there are other criteria for a president. Someone mentioned Gary Johnson. Did Gary Johnson fail the presidential leadership test this week with his comments about Aleppo?
As the Johnson supporter, I will throw in first. I would say that the way Kevin phrased it is a bit too far, but I will say Johnson failed to be informed. It was a failure to stay informed, and that was obvious in that he did not recognize the city of Aleppo. I will note three things. One, he acknowledged the failure. He said he had to do better, and I think it showed himself really to be human in a way that voters appreciated, even the ones that will not vote for him, which even I'll admit is about 85 to 90% of the voters.
I just want to jump in here. I'm going to let you finish your thought because
I'll get to the other two.
But I think this is worth pointing out. In many people's opinion, I'm not saying it's yours, DJ. In many people's opinion, Hillary Clinton getting a pneumonia and having a coughing fit is not, proof of her being human, but Gary Johnson not knowing that there's a human tragedy happening in Syria, in the city of Aleppo, that just shows his humanity. To me, that encapsulates the contrarian craziness of the 2016 campaign. Okay, that said, go ahead.
No, because the Hillary thing, that means there's dust in her exhaust. And that's
the Hillary thing also feeds into the Hillary thing also feeds into a really long-running narrative, feels like the wrong word, a pattern of misbehavior, of half-truths and untruths coming from her on a continual basis. It's not that she lied about her health. It's that she lied about her health and 18 other things where she's gotten, either lied or told half-truths. And what does she actually tell the truth about?
Well, Cliff, I agree with you there, believe it or not. But we're talking about two different issues. One is her mendacity, and I'm agreeing with you there. This is hard evidence that she is sometimes not fully truthful with the American people. But I was talking about the health issue. Okay, with that said, I did jump in and
that's quite all right. That's quite all right.
Take over. Right. Go ahead, DJ.
The second thing I would note is that once Johnson recovered, for lack of a better term, the policy that he recommended regarding Syria, one with which I don't agree. I've never agreed with Johnson on Syria policy. I'm voting for him for other reasons. Is the policy that the Obama administration is actually attempting to implement with the ceasefire it agreed to with Russia on Syria on Friday, one day after this Johnson interview. And the third thing I would note is that a number of Johnson's critics, and admittedly none of them are running for president, he is, so he should be held to a higher standard. But I would like to note, just for some Schadenfreude value, the fact that a number of his critics then promptly stumbled over themselves on this. For example, Mike Barnacle, who actually asked the question and then defended Johnson later on it, declared Aleppo the epicenter of the Syrian refugee crisis. That is not true. The Syrian refugee crisis is so massive and so horrifying that it has no epicenter. It is just a countrywide disaster. Two, Joe Scarborough then said, well, that's like somebody who doesn't recognize Sarajevo in 1991. Yeah, except that Bosnia didn't declare its independence until 1992, and Sarajevo was not the disaster zone until 1993 and 1994. Then you had the New York Times, the lovely New York Times, which reported on this and then declared Aleppo the ISIS capital, which it's not. Then corrected itself and said it's an ISIS stronghold, which it's not. And then issued a formal correction in which it declared Aleppo as the capital of Syria, which it's not, which required a double correction where they corrected their first correction. So, yes, none of them are running for president. Gary Johnson is. Gary Johnson has to hold himself to a higher standard, and I think he did by acknowledging his failure. Your mileage may vary. But the fact that a large number of people jumping on Johnson for not recognizing Aleppo themselves misrecognized Aleppo is something we have to, at the very least, chuckle about.
I just want to jump in and say that DJ wrote a really good article about this on his blog. DJ, I want to give you a plug. What's the name of your blog again?
Bearingdrift.com, and the particular post is, "What is Aleppo? A symptom of a larger problem."
Great.
Has anybody ever thought that possibly some of the American people that are more of the average voters that aren't, in tune like some of us and others are, do you think maybe this almost endears them, though, to Gary Johnson in a strange way? Because I saw people on Facebook readily admitting they had no idea.
It reminds me of the codes group thing with Iran, where Trump got tripped up on that back last August, and his response was basically what amounts to, A, I thought it was the Kurds, and B, this is, at some point, it's trivia.
I would say this. I think Johnson's reaction is what endeared him to more Americans. The fact that he said, "Yes, I goofed. I should have known. I did not know, and I'll do better next time." Politicians usually don't admit when they're wrong. I've been following politics for some 20 to 25 years, and I can only remember, and it's probably just my memory, one candidate who said, "I made a mistake and I'm sorry," and that was George Bush the Elder when he apologized to the Republican convention in 1992 for raising taxes. For everybody else, it's mistakes were made, things happened, if I offended anybody, if you think I behaved inappropriately. There is rarely, I should say, any straight up, "I was wrong. I goofed that up. I got to do better next time."
I have a question about Johnson real quick. Is Johnson getting security briefs,
No.
briefings on daily? No, he's not.
No, just
Like,
not. There's the two major party candidates are. I think a good
Does he
question
get
would
Secret
be
Service though?
no, he doesn't. But if he
okay.
if he reached that 15% threshold that got him into the debates, would he then qualify for those? That's a darn good question.
That is a good question.
Now,
Does anybody know if Thoreau got those back in 92?
I don't know. But DJ, I think, was just talking about people's failure to know stuff, which is a natural segue to the Commander-in-Chief Forum that happened earlier this week, where Donald Trump
a lot of that.
didn't know a lot of stuff. And the question is, was it the moderator's responsibility, in this case Matt Lauer, was it his responsibility to, as DJ put it before the show, copy edit Donald Trump or fact check him in real time?
Well, you tend to get a decent amount of that sort of stuff going on at the primary level, where the moderators end up having to fill in the candidates. So Lauer did an all right job. It wasn't like that mess back last August. So
that mess back last August.
Matt Lauer. It's not as messy as last August. Yes, sir.
I don't know what you guys feel about journalism, but I think it takes a certain skill set to be able to moderate a debate. And just because Matt Lauer can host the Today Show doesn't mean that he's going to be the next Candy Crowley or whoever it may be. I think that this comes with I'm being serious. I think this comes with a certain skill set in journalism, and I just don't think that he's cut out for this.
But not just a skill set, but also a prior knowledge of government and how it works and what's going on in the world. And right now, I think Matt Lauer has a really basic knowledge of chicken parmesan recipes from celebrity chefs and animal tricks.
Okay, I want to step in, and I'm the one that actually made fun of Lauer, and I think he did a crappy job, actually. But I'm going to defend Lauer now. I'm going to contradict myself. He did do a crappy job, in my opinion.
He did it. Oh, wait. But let's say real crappy job.
Real crappy job.
Okay.
But here's what no one has said yet. I think that he went into this thinking, everybody says Hillary always slips and slides whenever the emails are brought up. I'm going to find the way to parse the question that nails her. I think that that's what was in his mind when he used that little judgment thing to transition to the emails. His big mistake was, and it was his producer's mistake as well, once he had covered that question and that issue, they should never have gone to the Navy lieutenant, the former Navy lieutenant, who asked the follow-up email question. That's where it went off the rails. It had been asked and answered. And the producers were not savvy enough to say, oops, let's scratch that one and go to a different viewer question. It was in going to that last question where they overdid it. So some of it was Matt Lauer not realizing that that's what was coming. Some of it was the producers not being nimble enough on their feet to make that adjustment. But that's why it felt like piling on.
That sounds like a workable theory, because it had Lauer not been focused so heavily on the emails, he might have noticed that Hillary seemed to forget that Libya is still in the midst of a civil war. But yeah. The other thing is, it's also a reminder is that a lot of people who are really upset about the email thing have had experience in the Defense Department, which treats this, again, much differently than every other department, including the State Department. Kevin and I grew up on different sides of the Hudson River, but we've probably both heard a phrase that is very common in the New York area: the real crime in America is what's legal. Oh. And the simple fact of the matter is, the lax treatment of email security from the State Department as a whole probably got Mrs. Clinton in trouble more than her normal desire to just be secretive and not give anything away to people. And folks from the Defense Department, particularly folks who've been in the military all their lives and who have no other experience outside the military in the federal government, probably don't realize that the rest of the government, including the State Department, treats classified information with far more casual behavior than the Defense Department itself does.
I am so glad you brought that up, DJ, because you segued perfectly into a point that I want to make. The idea of legality in government. A lot of people, when the email thing first came up for Hillary Clinton, a lot of people asked the question, well, who authorized this? And what she could never say, but what I was thinking was, she was the head of the State Department. She can authorize it. Who is going to tell the Secretary of State what she can or cannot do in her own department? And it goes back to... Hold on. Before you jump down my throat, let me finish this thought. Rudy Giuliani this week, actually this morning on one of the talk shows, was being interviewed about, I think it was the idea of striking at the families of terrorists, or maybe, whether torture is legal under certain circumstances. And Rudy Giuliani said anything is legal during war, which harkens back to something that I'm sure DJ will remember that Richard Nixon said. He said, when the president does it, it's legal.
It's not, yeah.
And, of course, he was proven wrong. But
well, hang on a second. Kevin, not to necessarily burst your bubble, but he actually said it in an interview with David Frost in 1977.
Thank you.
And
You're
the
right.
exact phrase was, when the president does it, it is not illegal. And people just look like, what? But yeah, that was essentially where it came from, and yeah, we should shudder at that.
Well, so that brings me to something that I wanted to bring up this week, which is people who are thinking of voting for Trump or people who are supporting him. I asked Emily last week, and I know that Emily, I don't believe that anyone is locked into their vote now. We're all figuring this out, but Emily did say that she is, considering a vote for Donald Trump. And I asked her, well, how do you justify that? And I even laid out a premise that, look, Trump is really, a competent businessman who is being maybe buffoonish on the campaign trail. But if given the opportunity, hold on. I'm paraphrasing what we talked about last week. But if given the opportunity, he would appoint competent people to the cabinet. He would appoint a competent, national security advisor. And he would do a competent job because he's a smart, competent man. Again, I'm paraphrasing what I asked Emily, and she sort of agreed with it last week. Emily, you can jump in if I'm misstating your thoughts. But my concern this week that I've thought a lot about is, I think we've gotten to this place now where I think Donald Trump has shown his colors. The man thinks about the presidency and thinks about power in a way that I think is antithetical to being president of the United States. And the fact that one of his great supporters and I think lead advisors, Rudy Giuliani, would say something like, anything is legal in a time of war. If the president does it, it's legal. Rudy Giuliani could be his Secretary of Defense, could be his Attorney General, could have another high cabinet position. Do we want people like that in government? Is that the change that Americans are looking for? It's not the change I'm looking for.
First of all, I don't think Rudy Giuliani is going to be his choice. I think his age is probably going to be a factor. He's a couple years older than Trump even. I think he might keep him on as maybe a close advisor of some sort. Maybe a cabinet position possibly. But I think the biggest thing that we're looking at this election really more than anything is that, and I hear what you're saying, Kevin, by the way, about Trump being, drunk on power. We meet people like that all the time. The question is, some hide it better than others. And, I can't think for a moment that there hasn't been several candidates like that. He just wears it on his sleeve, and he's a bit of a pompous ass, and he shows it more readily. So I think that's part of that. But, I think that this question is probably best suited for Cliff, because I'm still on the fence about Mr. Trump in a lot of ways, in a lot of positions. So I think as the Trump surrogate, that's probably best suited for him.
Thank you very much. When you look at what Giuliani said, it's a logical outgrowth of the unitary executive theory we saw pushed during the Bush administration. This is not coming completely out of left field. Now, it's arguably more of a stretch of it, but at the same time, it falls under the same broad theory. There's also, of course, the sticky question of international law and how much of that, is actual law versus cute theoretical framework made so that a bunch of blue helmets based out of New York can feel good about themselves. Personally, I'm not a fan of unitary executive theory. I'll go ahead and say that right out. I don't like it. I do think there need to be some checks and balances in there. That being said, I think you do have to ask the question of what isn't legal during war. Obviously, quote unquote, crimes against humanity aren't, but there is a very broad area which falls under the commander-in-chief's power that the courts tend to defer to the presidency on, or at least tend to kick the can until he's not in office.
You know something? Thank you, Cliff, because you're now making me do something I haven't done in 7.5 years, and that is to defend President George W. Bush. Because frankly, I really don't think that is the proper way to describe the way Bush handled or acquired his war powers. When it came to the Patriot Act, he wanted a law. He wanted a law enacted by Congress. When it came to the military court system that he used to try enemy combatants, he wanted a law from Congress. When it wanted authorization to use military force, he did not do what President Obama has done, which essentially used the 2001 authorization to say, I can fight anybody that I call a Muslim terrorist anywhere on earth. He went back to Congress and asked for authorization to liberate Iraq, and he got it in 2002. He was very respectful of congressional prerogative. He always looked to international treaties and to previous presidents' actions and previous laws enacted to justify the powers that he felt he needed. In my opinion, he really, although there are folks like John Yoo out there who very much pushed the expansive unitary theory, I don't really see that much in George W. Bush. I see him relying as a very good deal on precedent, and where he couldn't find precedent, asking for congressional authorization to give him the powers that he thought he needed. I don't see any of that kind of restraint or respect of Congress on the part of Donald Trump. I just don't.
And I want to just point out, by the way, that Barack Obama asked Congress for authorization to respond to Syria's use of chemical weapons, and the Congress refused him, and he did not use the 2001 War Powers Act. He respected Congress and has been getting beaten up over that ever since.
I was referring to the military action against Daesh. Okay. He did not move against Assad when in my opinion I think he basically hoped that Congress would spare him from the action to take action against Assad. I don't really think he wanted to. I think he got trapped by his words.
Oh, please.
But again,
he definitely wanted to. Congress stopped him, and the Republicans have been beating him up ever since.
Based on the authorization, I mean, when you put forth an authorization, and John McCain actually tells you this authorization doesn't give you the power that you should have, you should ask for more, and he doesn't do it, that tells me that there may have been something else going on. But to make a very long story short, I don't think Trump and Giuliani are necessarily following in George W. Bush's footsteps. I think George W. Bush was far more respectful of congressional power and a precedent than he's given credit for. George W. Bush did a lot of things wrong. I don't think that was one of them.
Okay. And with that, I think we've covered the week. Cliff, what do you think?
I think that's got us pretty good, so I think I will take us out. Please send us your questions at moreperfectunionpodcast.com, where you can also find our blogs and host bios. Don't forget to rate us and review us on iTunes. And if you enjoy political debates and would like to be a part of ours, join us on Facebook in our political discussion group, Open Fire. We're all there, and we'd love to see you there, too. Until next week, bye-bye.
Happy drinking.
Woohoo!
I had sparkling lime water tonight, so... Maybe I needed to drink.